The chair scraped back before the words came. Get out. Sit somewhere else. This table is for family. The sentence landed cleanly. Practiced. Loud enough to carry. For half a second, no one reacted. Then laughter broke loose, easy, unbothered, familiar. Glasses clinked. Someone smiled into their napkin. Another leaned back amused. I stayed where I was. Her gaze lingered, waiting for movement. When none came, she repeated it slower this time, as if speaking to a child. This table is for family. My son's eyes dropped to the tablecloth. A relative reached for bread. Someone shifted their chair an inch farther from mine. The waiter appeared perfectly timed, shoulders stiff with recognition. The leather folder was placed directly in front of me, not centered, deliberate. For the table. No hands moved, no questions asked. She's got it. The confidence came without even a glance at me. She handles things. A nod from down the table. You're doing well these days. Another voice followed. It's nothing for you. I opened the folder. $2,000. The silence sharpened. Every pause waited on me. I felt the expectation press in an argument, a refusal, something loud enough to justify what they'd done. The certainty across from me hardened already, writing the ending in her head. I smiled. Not polite, not apologetic, controlled. The glass was cool against my fingers. One sip. Then the card slid into place. The waiter didn't move right away. His eyes flicked up uncertain. A single nod settled it. Thank you. When the folder disappeared, satisfaction spread across the table. A chair shifted back, arms crossed. Victory assumed. That wasn't so hard. I stood, straightened my jacket, lifted my purse. No one tried to stop me. No one thought they needed to. I took 3 steps toward the exit before the sound ripped through the room. A scream. High, fractured, panicked. Laughter collapsed. Chairs jerked. Conversations died mid-breath. I didn't turn around. I already knew who had lost control, and I knew exactly what she had just realized. The story you are about to hear is a work of fiction created by the Her Shadow Channel team based on real-life situations to convey lessons about family emotions and human values. All characters and events are illustrative. I stood in front of the mirror longer than necessary, smoothing a jacket that didn't need smoothing. Neutral colors. Nothing that drew attention. Nothing that invited comment. My son had texted earlier. Dinner's at 7. Everyone's excited. No heart. No extra line. Since the wedding messages like that had replaced phone calls. Short, efficient, easy to misread as normal if I wanted to. I arrived early. That had always been my habit, showing up before there was anything to be late for. The hostess glanced at the reservation, then at me, then back down again. Her smile held, but it shifted. They're already seated. I followed her through the dining room. My son's table came into view before I heard him. He laughed louder than he used to. His wife sat at the center posture, straight, one hand resting possessively on the back of his chair. Her eyes flicked up when she saw me. Not surprise, assessment. You made it, she offered, as if attendance had been uncertain. My son stood halfway, then stopped. Mom, you look fine, fine. Not nice, not good to see you. A chair at the far end scraped lightly as someone nudged it out with their foot. Not offered, not pulled back. I reached for it anyway. Menus were already open. Drinks already poured. We went ahead and ordered appetizers, she announced, tapping the list with a manicured finger. You don't mind. It wasn't phrased as a question. I said I didn't. I always said I didn't. The conversation flowed around me, vacation plans, inside jokes, names I didn't recognize. When I spoke, the rhythm shifted. A pause. Then the topic changed. At one point, I leaned toward my son. He didn't lean back. We'll talk later, he murmured, eyes still on his plate. Later never came anymore. By the time the entrees were discussed, my place at the table had already been decided. Not by seating, by silence. I noticed it then. Not sharply, quietly, and I let it pass. The chair I was guided toward sat at the narrow end of the table, angled slightly away from the center. Close enough to be counted, far enough to be ignored. Her hand hovered over the place settings as if arranging a display. That one's easier, she noted, already turning away. You won't be in anyone's way. No one objected. A cousin adjusted his napkin. Someone else reached for their glass. The arrangement settled without discussion. I took the seat. From there I could see everything. The way she positioned herself beside my son, body angled outward, creating a barrier that didn't require explanation. The way conversations were redirected with a lifted eyebrow or a gentle interruption. Authority didn't need volume. It needed consent. Menus closed around the table. We'll start with a few things for everyone, she announced, scanning faces, not waiting for agreement. Something nice. My son nodded. A sister-in-law smiled. Approval moved down the line in small gestures. I glanced at the menu anyway. That won't be necessary, she added, eyes sliding toward me. We've got it covered. A server appeared, pen ready. She ordered smoothly, confidently, naming dishes without hesitation. Each selection sounded deliberate. Each pause felt rehearsed. When the server turned toward me, she waved him off. She's fine. The pen hesitated, then moved on. I folded my menu and placed it on the table. No one noticed. The conversation shifted to family plans, holidays, who would host, who would travel. Decisions made in passing, as if the outcomes were obvious. We'll keep it small, she said. Immediate family only. Her gaze didn't reach me. A hand brushed my elbow as someone leaned across the table. Excuse me. Not apology. Clearance. That was when it became clear. The seat, the orders, the exclusions delivered so softly they barely registered as actions. This wasn't a moment. It was a sequence. She wasn't reacting to me. She was presenting something to the room. And the room was listening. I adjusted my posture, straightened my shoulders, and remained exactly where I was. The tone shifted once the first round arrived. Glasses were raised before anyone checked the list. Let's do another came easily, already anticipating agreement. A hand tilted toward the server. And something nicer this time. Laughter followed. Comfortable. Expectant. My son didn't look up when his wife added another bottle. He nodded instead, distracted, relieved not to be deciding anything. Across from him, a cousin leaned in, pointing at the menu with sudden enthusiasm. That one. I've always wanted to try it. She smiled. Of course. Plates multiplied. Descriptions grew longer. Ingredients were discussed with authority that didn't belong to anyone paying attention to numbers. Someone glanced in my direction, then away again. Another glance followed, brief and confirming. The exchange passed without words. The server returned, pen moving quickly now. She kept pace, voice steady, building the order piece by piece. Each addition felt less like a choice and more like a signal. That's fine, she waved, dismissing a pause. We'll share. The word landed lightly. Generous on the surface. Final, underneath. When desserts came up, there was a momentary hesitation. Not about whether to order them, but how many. 2, she decided. Then reconsidered. No, make it 4. My son shifted in his chair. That's a lot. Her hand settled on his arm, firm and smiling. Everyone deserves a little indulgence. He relaxed. The discussion ended. I caught the server's eye as she stepped back. Her expression flickered recognition, perhaps, or caution. Then it smoothed out. She wrote, nodded, and moved away. Conversation rose again, louder now. Stories repeated, jokes landed harder. Someone mentioned a recent bonus. Another teased about upgrades and plans. A pattern took shape without being named. The comfort wasn't accidental. The ease wasn't earned. I folded my hands in my lap and watched the assumption settle. It moved from person to person, quiet and unanimous. By the time the last order was placed, no one looked in my direction anymore. They didn't need to. The decision had already been made. The folder arrived without ceremony and stopped directly in front of me. Leather, heavy, final, no one reached for it. No one pretended not to see it. The space around the table tightened, as if the air itself had been instructed to wait. Her gaze stayed forward. You've got it. Not a request. A conclusion. My son shifted, then stilled. Someone else cleared their throat and looked away. Across from me, a fork paused mid-air, hovering, then lowered back to the plate. I opened the folder. $2,000. The number didn't shock me. The certainty did. This had been decided long before the menus were closed. A small smile touched her mouth. Not kind, anticipatory. Everyone had such a nice time, she added lightly. You wouldn't want to ruin that. The implications settled where it was meant to. Protest would be ungrateful. Refusal would be embarrassing. Silence would be cooperation. I rested my hands on the table and waited. Long enough for discomfort to surface. Long enough for someone to speak if they planned to. No one did. I reached into my purse. The card slid free, smooth, and familiar. I placed it inside the folder and paused there, fingers resting on the edge. Not hesitation. Intention. Before closing it, I turned the card over and wrote a brief note on the receipt. Small. Neat. Unremarkable to anyone not trained to notice such things. The waiter returned, cautious now. His eyes dropped to the folder, then lifted to mine. I nodded once. Thank you, I offered steady. He took it and stepped away. Relief spread around the table, subtle but immediate. Shoulders loosened. Glasses lifted again. Conversation resumed as if a tension cord had been cut. That worked out, someone remarked. She leaned back, satisfied. I knew it would. I stood before the receipt came back. Chairs scraped softly as people shifted, startled by the movement. I adjusted my jacket, gathered my purse, and stepped away from the table without waiting for acknowledgement. Behind me, laughter rose again, lighter now, unguarded. It didn't follow me far. I had taken 3 steps when the sound split the room. It wasn't a gasp or a laugh gone wrong. It was sharp, high, and uncontained. Panic without polish. My name followed it, broken in the middle. Chairs scraped hard enough to draw attention from the bar. A glass tipped and shattered. Someone swore under their breath. I stopped, but I didn't turn. Behind me, her voice tried to recover its shape. Wait, no. That's not the words tangled, rushed, stripped of their certainty. Give that back. You can't just. The waiter answered before I could. Calm, professional, unyielding. Ma'am, it's already processed. A hand slapped the table. What does that mean? It means it's done, came back quieter now. And it means I need you to lower your voice. My son stood so fast his chair fell. What's going on? She spoke to him like he could fix it. She wrote something. On the receipt. I told you not to let her. I turned then. Not to explain. Not to defend myself. Only to meet her eyes once. Her face had drained of color. The smile she'd worn all evening was gone, replaced by calculation, running out of time. She understood now. Not everything, but enough. A cousin leaned in, whispering urgently. What did she do? Another voice followed louder. What are you talking about? The waiter returned with a measured step and a copy of the receipt held just out of reach. I'll need a manager. The word landed like a dropped plate. She reached for my son's arm again, but he pulled back, confusion tightening his jaw. You said she was just paying. I didn't think. Her voice cracked, then hardened. I didn't think she'd do that. The manager arrived composed and alert. A brief exchange followed, words kept low but precise. Heads bent, eyes widened. I adjusted my purse on my shoulder. The table that had laughed so easily minutes ago now held its breath. No one was comfortable anymore. No one was certain who was in control. I walked the rest of the way out without another word. The scream followed me only part way. I didn't slow down until the door closed behind me. My phone vibrated before I reached the sidewalk. Then again, I let it ring itself quiet. What I had never shared, never needed to, was the way that restaurant worked. The private room, the standing account, the quiet agreement signed years earlier when the place was still struggling and I was still working. I had been careful then. Careful now. Inside, voices rose and fell. The door opened just long enough for fragments to spill out. "You can't do that." Her voice snapped thinner now. "Reverse it." The manager answered with a tone meant for policies, not arguments. "The notation triggers a review. We're required to pause associated privileges." What privileges came from farther down the table? A pause followed. Then, the private dining account, the preferred reservations, the events access. My son's voice cut through, stunned. "What do you mean, paused?" Another voice rushed in sharp with disbelief. "Since when does she have anything to do with this place?" The manager didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Since the beginning. "The paperwork is on file." Silence landed heavy enough to feel through the glass. Her certainty unraveled in stages. First the denial, then the recalculation. Finally, the realization that no amount of volume would put things back where they were 10 minutes earlier. She never said anything. She pressed desperation leaking through the edges. Someone answered from the table slower now. Maybe she didn't have to. My phone vibrated again. This time a message broke through. "Mom, can we talk?" I didn't reply. Inside, the conversation shifted away from me and toward consequences. Dates mentioned. Calls that would need to be made. Plans quietly withdrawn. I adjusted my purse strap and waited until the voices settled into something smaller. Something careful. When I finally walked away, it wasn't anger that steadied me. It was clarity. I had been polite. I had been quiet. And I had been paying attention the entire time. The calls started before I reached home. My son's name flashed first. I let it fade. A minute later, his wife's number followed, then disappeared just as quickly. The silence after that lasted less than 10 minutes. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." Her voice came through a voicemail I didn't open until later. Careful. Reframed. Things got a little emotional at dinner. Another message arrived from a cousin. No one meant for it to go that far. The word meant did a lot of work. By morning, the tone shifted. "We should talk about how to smooth this over. This affects everyone. You know how people here can be." Savannah had always favored quiet reputations over loud truths. Damage didn't need proof. It needed witnesses. My phone rang again while I was pouring coffee. This time I answered. "Mom!" My son sounded tired, not angry. "She's really upset." I waited. "She didn't realize what she was doing," he continued. "If you could just explain." "I did explain," I replied. The words landed evenly. "I explained by leaving." He exhaled. "People are asking questions. They should." A pause followed longer than the others. "She feels like you embarrassed her." "I was invited to dinner," I said. "Not to perform." He didn't argue. That told me more than anything else. Later that afternoon, a message arrived from her. "No greeting this time. We can fix this if you're willing to be reasonable." Reasonable had always meant quiet compliance. I set the phone down without responding. By evening, the calls slowed. Apologies grew conditional. Invitations turned vague. Conversations happened without me, but about me. I let them. Dignity doesn't require consensus. It requires resolve. And I had already given enough notice. I stopped answering calls after that. Not out of anger, out of clarity. My son came by 2 days later. He stood in the doorway, longer than necessary, as if waiting for permission he used to assume. Age had softened his confidence in ways I recognized too well. "She's embarrassed," he began. "People are talking." I set a cup on the table between us and took my seat. I didn't offer one to him. Embarrassment fades, I said. Patterns don't. He rubbed his palms together. You could smooth this over. I agreed. I'm choosing not to. That landed heavier than an argument. He searched my face for anger and didn't find it. I didn't know how bad it was, he said quietly. I know, I replied. That was the problem. He tried again, softer. We're family. I met his eyes. Family doesn't rehearse humiliation. The word rehearsal made him flinch. Good. It meant he was listening. When he left, there was no slammed door. No raised voices. Just a pause in the hallway and the sound of footsteps moving away. Later, a message came through from his wife. Short. Careful. We can start fresh. I read it once and deleted it. I had spent years shrinking myself into available spaces. End seats, afterthoughts, invitations that arrived with instructions attached. Aging had taken some things from me, but it had given me this, the refusal to negotiate my dignity. Power had never interested me when it came with noise. I preferred the kind that let me choose where I stood and when I walked away. I hadn't lost a seat at a table. I had gained the ability to decide which tables were worth approaching at all. The house felt quieter after that, but not empty. I kept my routines. Morning coffee. Evening walks. The small habits that had carried me through decades of responsibility and compromise. Nothing about my days collapsed without them. If anything, they settled. My son stopped calling. Not abruptly, gradually. Messages spaced farther apart until there were none left to ignore. His wife never tried again. That silence felt intentional on her part, and I respected it more than the apologies she had rehearsed. A week later, a friend from church mentioned the dinner in passing, not details, just a pause in her sentence, a careful glance. Savannah had absorbed the story and moved it along, the way it always did, quietly, efficiently, without asking permission. I heard you handled yourself, she said. I nodded. That was enough. I didn't keep the seat they pushed me out of. I didn't keep the role they were comfortable assigning me. I didn't keep the illusion that proximity was the same thing as belonging. What I kept was simpler. My name stayed intact. No qualifiers. No apologies attached to it. My boundaries held, not loudly, not dramatically, just firmly enough that no one tried to cross them again. My future remained my own, unmanaged, unclaimed by anyone else's expectations. There were no victory laps. No final conversations where everyone understood at once. Life rarely arranges itself that neatly. What it did offer was distance, and distance clarified things I had spent years excusing. I hadn't been pushed out of a family. I had stepped away from a performance that required me to disappear in order to stay. That realization didn't arrive with relief. It arrived with steadiness. The kind that doesn't ask for witnesses or validation. I closed the door on that chapter without checking to see who was watching. Some things are worth paying for. Acceptance was never one of them.